Today, I'm turning myself into a Gyaru. If you didn't know already, Gyaru is a bold and over-the-top fashion style that exploded in Japan during the late 90s and early 2000s. And it's not just one thing. There's a whole bunch of different styles out there, like Tsuyome, Goshikyu, and Hime Gyaru. But today, we're trying out Yamanba, which might just be one of the most popular and original versions of Gyaru makeup. So let's get into it, starting off with contacts. Contacts are such a big thing when it comes to Gyaru makeup, and you might see with a lot of styles like Hime Gyaru or Ajajo that they're very subtle and relatively natural. But when it comes to a style like Yamanba, they're usually a lot more colorful and even more enlarging. Okay, after a lot of crying, that's the both of them in. I feel like I kind of need to massage my eyes a little bit. They kind of feel like a little bit itchy. But next up, we can focus on my eyebrows. Now when it comes to this, a lot of gals would bleach their eyebrows, usually to match their light colored hair. But my eyebrows are a bit dark, so I think I'm gonna glue them down. Back in the 90s, when Yamanba was first evolving from another style called Ganguro, most gals weren't really gluing their eyebrows down. They mostly just shaved or overplucked them until they were left with these super thin and angular brows. So this little glue stick trick has only really become more popular nowadays, especially for people like me, whose eyebrows really don't want to cooperate with them. Now instead of actually drawing eyebrows onto my face, I actually want to do eyeshadow first. With Yamanba, and even Gyaru make in general, the eyes matter far more than the eyebrows do. Everything about this look is built around this really white, exaggerated eye shape. So I'm just going in and blocking out where we want that to be. And something really interesting that I noticed when I was doing some research for this look is the way these Yamanba gals place their eyeshadow. Instead of just following the natural crease of the eye, a lot of gals actually place the highest point of their eyeshadow only a quarter of the way into the eyelid. So that way, it's super high up, and then it kind of drags out towards the outer corner. It's something that just looks so different to a lot of the makeup styles nowadays, and it's honestly kind of something that is a bit difficult to do, but I'm just hoping that with enough blending and glitter smacked on, it should look pretty okay. So now that I've popped on some eyeshadow, it's time for the most important part, eyeliner. So the upper eyeliner itself is honestly quite simple. I'm just taking it from my inner to my outer corners, but before I move on to my other eye, I'm gonna add a little wing to my inner corner just to exaggerate my eyes a little bit more. I've seen some people online argue that this should only be rounded or Gyarus don't do this, but it's something that can be seen across multiple other styles like Cyber, Hime, and sometimes even Roku. So I think it all just comes down to personal preference. But now it's time for the hard part, lower liner. In some of the more natural styles like Ajajo or Tsuyome, this part isn't really all that noticeable. But in Yamanba, this liner is supposed to be very bold and very droopy. And there's actually a pretty interesting reason behind that. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, Japan's beauty standards were all about pale skin, natural makeup, and really modest looks. So a lot of girls started to rebel against that. They got super dark tans, started bleaching their hair, and decided to experiment with all sorts of exaggerative makeup. But like always, a lot of older people, and even the Japanese media, weren't exactly big fans of it. Magazines started to drag them, TV hosts would label them ugly, and eventually people came up with a name for them, Yamanba. The name actually came from the word Yamauba, a yokai or mountain witch from Japanese folklore. And even though it was meant as an insult, gals just decided to take the name and run along with it. It wasn't really until softer, more prettier styles of Gyaru came along that people seemed to start appreciating Gyaru as a fashion culture instead of a problem. But even to this day, Yamanba and a lot of the other extreme styles still get a lot of hate. So this took a longer time than I actually expected. I'm a perfectionist. I know I take way too long trying to do anything, but even still, this took forever. But luckily, we can move on to my face now. And technically speaking, the base for Yamanba is pretty simple. The main thing is color. Contouring isn't really a thing in this style, and the same can be said when it comes to blush. So the whole point of this step is just to smack on some tan foundation and carve out these shapes around the eyes, which kind of creates this little mask. And that itself is very satisfying to do. Now, most people think that being Gyaru means you need to be tan, but that's not actually true. Back in the day, there were two big groups within the community. One was Shiro Gyaru, who were light-skinned gals who didn't tan, and the other was Kuro Gyaru, who did tan, and as you might be able to tell, Yamamba falls under. When Yamamba was at its peak though, the tans were really dark, and nowadays it's pretty much agreed upon not to go more than a few shades darker than your natural skin tone. And even though this foundation was supposed to match my tan, I didn't really feel like it looked too appropriate, so I did end up popping on some concealer to try and lighten it up. And that in and of itself was a lot harder than I thought it would be, but after adding layer upon layer, I think it definitely made it look a whole lot better. Now there is one more thing we have to add, and that's just this little line of concealer all the way down the nose. I've actually heard a few gals talk about doing this with a Posca marker, which is literally an acrylic paint pen that people use for art, and hearing that did make me cringe a little bit. I don't see how that could be good for your skin in any way, shape, or form, but I guess they were just trying to make do with what they could find at the time. But seriously guys, please don't use those on your face. While we're still playing around with concealer though, I think we can move on to lips. For old school Yamamba, lips were anything but natural. They were supposed to stand out, and you couldn't really achieve that sort of pigmentation with a normal lipstick, so Gyarus used concealer instead. It wasn't really about making the lips look bigger, and there isn't an exact inspiration behind it, but it was more so to match the contrast going on between the eyes and nose. And unlike the dewy or glowy makeup trends that we have at the moment, the face was supposed to be matte. So I'm just smacking a whole bunch of powder on my lips, forehead, and rest of my face. Now I'm pretty happy with how this looks so far, but it's not complete without accessories. So let's pop some on. Starting off with some lashes. Old school gals love dramatic lashes, and in a lot of cases, they would actually do the same thing as a lot of drag queens and layer 2 or 3 pairs to make them look super spiky and over the top. And while I was doing some research for this look, I found out that a few gals would actually use something called eyelid glue instead of normal lash glue, which apparently would help them create this sort of artificial crease. But since I don't really need that, we're sticking to my normal lash glue. I also think I want to go ahead now and quickly change out my nose rings to something a bit more flashy or blingy, and then maybe pop in some nicer septum jewelry because the one I had in before doesn't really match the vibe. Another thing that I want to try out is something that I've seen on a few girls like Akarin from the group Black Diamond, who have all these little lip piercings. Instead of them wearing normal studs though, they seem to wear these long barbells or even dangly belly jewelry in them, so I wanted to try that out on myself. And now that we've popped on all these little stickers and gems, we can basically just focus on clothing. And that of course includes lace. These were such a big thing in early Yamamba fashion, and a lot of the inspiration came from the beachy California vibe that Gyaru were obsessed with at the time. I honestly think this is coming together really well, but there is one thing that's missing. And that's because I've got this. This is just some random wig that I got off of Temu for I think maybe like $5. And I've gently adorned it with all these little accessories. Now considering the fact that my natural hair is quite dark, it basically looks black right now, I think I'm gonna put on a little hairnet so that way, once I pop this wig on, it should be giving scalp. Now, I don't really know what I was thinking with this, because as soon as I popped this wig on, all the accessories were muddled and tilted, so I had to take them all out one by one and then try and comb out this wig, which is pretty frustrating to do because these hairnets were starting to give me a headache. But after messing around with these little bows, I think I can finally say that this is a final look. This was honestly so much fun to try, and I actually feel really pretty right now. I know it's got a really distinct look to it that some people might not like, but I actually love it on myself. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!